the legislative branch is really, if you had to argue what might be the most powerful branch in terms of real-time impact on people's lives, you could almost argue that it's the federal legislature, the Congress, because it's the Congress that makes the laws, and it's the Congress that has the power of the purse, the power to expend the federal resources, our tax money and revenues generated from various sources. Now, the executive branch does have a wide range of power. Initially, one of its major responsibilities, and endures, as our brother Deontay Wilder may say, to this day, is foreign policy. So, defense. And of course, defense becomes the kind of boogie woman that presidents use, that the executive uses to scare people. We've got to have a strong defense. We got to have 1 million. I think now there are close to 5,000 nuclear warheads that the United States has. I mean, more power than to destroy the earth a score of times. But at any rate, so you see the executive. And of course, the executive has the ability to push legislation. The executive proposes a budget. So when you see the president propose a budget, that budget has to be passed by Congress. So when you say, oh, the president is going to cut Social Security, the president ain't going to do anything. A budget is a political document. That's the executive saying, this is what I would like to see, but it's still got to go back to the legislative. And then finally, and I think probably most importantly for this coming election, there's the judiciary. And you take it back to one of the early justices of the Supreme Court, John Marshall, first justice, Supreme Court Chief Justice. His famous statement in the case Marbury versus Madison, where you see a lawsuit reach the Supreme Court, and it's really a dicta. In the law, a dicta, as we know, is something that is said in a judicial ruling that isn't directly on point for the dispensation of the case, but it becomes a statement that is important for interpreting the law more broadly. John Marshall says, it is the duty of the court, the Supreme Court, to say what the law is. So, 15-second review. The federal legislature, Congress, passes the law. The executive executes the law, signs the law, foreign policy. But the courts determine how that law is to be interpreted. And what the courts say theoretically becomes the law as it is enacted, as it is interpreted. So most famous two cases most Black people know, Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, Brown versus Board of Education. You see that separate but equal has no place in American law. But consider this. There is no new constitutional language between 1896 and 1954. You know what changed? The court. So just think about the power of a judge to say the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution says that there should be equal protection under the law and due process under law. In 1896, we say that means that you can sit in a different railroad car and you can go to a different school, and as long as you have equal protection under law, that's okay. In 1954, the same institution, the court says, yeah, that's not going to work. Well, did the law change? No, our interpretation of the law changed. Whoa, that's a lot of power. Now, what has happened since Donald Trump was put in as president? I won't say necessarily elected, since he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes, and looks like probably stole at least Wisconsin in terms of voter suppression, but he's the president of the United States. Since 2017, the Congress, the Senate, which has the ability to nominate and advance, to advance judges. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. How do you get to be a judge on the federal bench? You probably talk about that. The executive, the president, nominates judges to sit on the federal bench. Why is that important? The federal bench consists of district court judges, courts of appeals judges, and Supreme Court judges. So there are 3 levels of judges. All of those judges are nominated by the president, by the executive, but they must be confirmed, advice and consent function of the federal legislature, the Senate. So if you've got a president who nominates a person for a judgeship, a federal judgeship, district court judgeship, a court of appeals, and there are 11 courts of appeals in the country, and then the Supreme Court of the United States, of course, we know Supreme Court consisting of 9 justices. And by the way, there's no number required in the United States Constitution. You could expand that number. Roosevelt tried it and people balked, because you want to have a number that's going to result in getting a majority. So an odd number like 9 is going to work, but 11 could work, 13 could work, so forth and so on. But you can nominate a judge. The Senate says we don't want that judge, they can reject your nomination. So what you would like to do, if you're a political party, and we know now through American history, there have been various types of parties, the Whigs and so forth, but now you have Democrats and Republicans, two-party system as it has evolved, or as it has developed, so to speak. If you are a Republican or a Democrat, you want to have a president of the same party as the majority in the Senate. So when you nominate a judge, they just push the judge through. Now, this is important because there are moments when, for example, Clarence Thomas, nominated by George H.W. Bush, a Republican, but when you get to the Senate was controlled by the Democrats. Who was in charge of the Judiciary Committee? Joe Biden. Exactly. And so, you know, Karen, you and me, we remember that battle. We remember when Clarence Thomas accused the senators of conducting a high-tech lynching. But why was he saying that? Because not just Anita Faye Hill out of Arkansas, but a number of other women had come forward and said, this guy was talking crazy in the job. He talking about pubic hairs. He talking about Long Donald Silver. The man harassed me. And it was Joe Biden who made the decision not to admit into testimony and have come to testify live the other women. Anita Hill testified, sure. And of course, Biden has apologized. Oh, I'm sorry. But understand that if the Democrats had wanted Clarence Thomas not to be elevated to the Supreme Court, they could have stopped him. They had the numbers. But this was the period, and of course, Joe Biden really hadn't changed much if we listened to him during the debate season. Oh yeah, I can work across the aisle. I work with Strom Thurmond. We work together. Joe Biden and the notion of the civility of the Senate and the chamber of the Senate, and I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, if you look at the Senate and the House of Representatives is where you have all the boiling hot coffee. They in there arguing with everybody. And then you pour that hot coffee out of the cup into the saucer. The saucer is the United States Senate. That's where you pour the passions out to cool. And then the Senate cooler heads prevail. And we know that the institution is important. Joe Biden is operating on that like the old days, the Lyndon Johnson days. And I can pat somebody on the back. I know you're a racist, but come on, let's pass this civil rights bill. Well, fast forward to today. Now you've got Mitch McConnell. And there's a bookshelf of books written on Mitch McConnell's crazy rise to power, formerly a Democrat in days of yore, switches over to the Republican Party, rises through. There's a book called The Cynic, which kind of talks about how Mitch McConnell doesn't believe in anything except power and how to hold power.
Come on.
His dream, his dream wasn't to be president. His dream wasn't to be governor of Kentucky. His dream was to be the majority leader of the United States Senate. So just
why was that important? More important than being a president?
Well, if we remember what we've been talking about these last few minutes, of those three branches of power, it's the federal legislature that controls so much of the our everyday lives. The budget appropriations, the ability to elevate judges, very powerful. And if you're the leader of the United States Senate, that means the two houses, you're the one who gets to help push forward judges. You're the one who gets final say on the budget. You can say, okay, you people over there, the House of Representatives, I know y'all want equal rights. I know y'all want mail voting. I know y'all want to protect women's rights, but it's kind of come over to the Senate. And if I'm the majority leader, I'll stick that in my back pocket. Or as he likes to brag, I put it in my graveyard. And he's looking at a model like Robert Caro, right there in New York City, he's working now on the final volume of his magisterial multi-volume work on Lyndon Baines Johnson. When he wrote the one volume in his multi-volume work called Lyndon Johnson, Master of the Senate, what you see is Lyndon Johnson understood that. It was Johnson's skill as the majority leader of the United States Senate that allowed him, once he became president of the United States, to push through all that civil rights legislation. Now, people talk about who was the greatest American president, and I don't get in those debates because as a Black person,
we have very few options.
We're gonna have this conference. There's very few options, right? And so, however, if we look at the 20th century, arguably, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, even though the racial implications of the New Deal, I'm thinking now of books like Fear Itself, books that talk about how the GI Bill was used to exclude Black people from being able to get mortgages in these white settlements, white developments like Levittown. There was a racial dimension to the New Deal, but what we can't deny is that through those policies of the New Deal, you do see the floor put under what becomes the middle class in this country. So you could argue that Roosevelt could be the person, the guy who wrote who wrote Fear Itself, also wrote a book called When Affirmative Action Was White. And he talks about the fact that these New Deal policies basically were affirmative action for poor whites. It elevated them out of the poor into the middle class. Ira Katz-Nelson is his name, a sociologist, social scientist. But at any rate, so you can make an argument for Roosevelt, but you could also make an argument for Lyndon Johnson. You can argue, people say, well, Kennedy was a great guy. He wanted to help Black people. Well, I won't get into that. There's another great book called The Bystander, a British scholar who writes about the fact that, Kennedy had some civil rights sensibilities, but he wasn't able to advance any of that civil rights legislation.
Because he was an Irish Catholic who was also discriminated against. And we see that all the time in the workplace when Black people get into a position of power. A lot of us, some of us, tend to be extra hard on Black people, or we distance ourselves from other Black people because we don't want anyone to think that we're looking out because we got, and it's not, it's just self-preservation, right? I don't want to lose my position, so I'm going to not look out for the other Black people because I don't want them to assume just because I'm Black, I'm looking out. Kennedy came in under that minority, immigrant, Irish Catholic, dirty moniker.
Yes.
So he couldn't then turn around, even though his brother was a little different, which is why he had to die.
How about that?
Couldn't turn around and look out for people. He had to preserve that thing that got him into the White House.
No question.
Lyndon B. Johnson didn't have that problem as a Southern Texas.
He did not.
Yeah,
That's right. That's right. No, that's very important for people to understand. See, that's the importance of study. See, that. So you can look at Kennedy's behavior and be able to judge it based on what you know about Kennedy, based on what you know about Honey Fitz, his grandfather, based on what you know about Joe Kennedy, his father, running bootleg liquor and then becoming respectable, and then looking at the Kennedy clan and how his older brother Joe, who was supposed to be the one, but he dies in World War II. So now here comes JFK, and then of course Bobby behind him, and then Ted behind him, and that Irish Catholic ethnic political machine that is famous in Boston, famous in New York from the days of Boston.
Tammany Hall. Yeah.
Tammany Hall, no question. If you get in, we expect something from you in return. But it's ethnic cultural politics, except one thing that unifies them all in terms of in terms of electoral politics and the tie of culture is what you're going to have to become is white enough to be able to enter this system. And the way you become white, this is the work of Noel Ignatieff, how the Irish became white, for example. I mean, one way you become white, in fact, the best way you can become white is by saying, I ain't Black. So who can't climb up this ethnic melting pot politics? The Blacks. Right. You know what I'm saying? Because Blackness is the thing you define yourself against.